All right, welcome back in. It's the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. We're getting ready for the Final Four. Loyola Chicago up against Michigan, Villanova, and Kansas. So let's head out to San Antonio right now. Welcome the head coach of Southern Illinois. He, of course, coaches in the Missouri Valley, so very familiar with Loyola Chicago, and also spent a few years on the Kansas staff. And that, of course, is Barry Hinson. Coach Hinson, it's Zach Gelb here on CBS Sports Radio. Thanks for the time, and how are you?
Oh, Zach, I'm doing great. I mean, it's about 73 degrees. You can hear everybody yelling here. I'm on the streets of San Antonio. So it's a great Final Four. My gosh, we've got 4 great teams, and I think we got 2 great games coming up for tomorrow.
You got to love it. And if you look at the Cinderella of this tournament, it's been Loyola Chicago as an 11, now advancing to the Final Four, 40 minutes away from playing for a national championship. Everyone that maybe isn't associated with the Missouri Valley looks at this as a huge surprise. How do you look at this, having played them twice this year? Are you shocked by what they're done, or do you think, you know what, this was a team that was pretty good when you played them?
Well, I think anybody would be shocked, Zach. I don't think anybody would have said that they expected this. But at the same time, now that you go look back at it and see what they've done, you know, they've won all these games in a row. They've gained an enormous amount of confidence. All these guys stayed together. And the power of the mid-majors, Zach, has always been for those guys to have 4th and 5th-year seniors or juniors in a ball club and just kind of put together the pieces of the puzzle. And, you know, Porter has talked about so much about when they got through last year. I mean, this is a team that finished 5th in the Missouri Valley last year, but they had a really good team. And he had the foresight to talk about it with these guys literally a year ago from this time period. And they made a commitment as a unit and as a group. And, they also caught lightning in a bottle, but they did a great job. And I'd have to tell you that the Valley did a great job in preparing them to play because, Zach, we were the 8th best conference in the country this year as a mid-major. And I thought there was great preparation. And I don't know how many teams have a spiritual point guard, but they've got the spiritual point guard of all time with Sister Jean. So I will make a prediction for it. Every school, whether it be Catholic or Protestant, has always had like a pastor or a father on a bench. But next year, you're going to see more nuns on the bench than you ever see because a new trend has been set, my man. So if you think that there won't be a nun with a habit next year on some of these benches throughout the country, you're crazy because I'm telling you, it's kind of like when Bayham started playing zone and Coach Krzyzewski played zone, all coaches will start following that. Let me tell you, because of Sister Jean, there are going to be some nuns on some benches next year.
It's absolutely crazy. We're talking to Barry Hinson right now on CBS Sports Radio. When you see a team that's an 11 make it to the Final Four, the easy argument right away for a fan to say is that the selection committee got it wrong. They were underseeded. Do you think this team was underseeded or they're just going on some crazy run?
Well, let me. I'm going to go one step further back, and this is your network, and I have a complaint. Let's go back to the Missouri Valley Championship. In the championship game, CBS is making the announcement that if they don't win this game, they're not going to the NCAA Tournament. Now, when you say an 11 seed is playing for the Final Four, did they get the seeding wrong? I don't know if they got the seeding wrong or not. It doesn't matter. It just goes to prove that there are great teams every year, and Coach Self used to say this when I was at Kansas all the time. Anybody can be great for one game on one day. And then if you catch fire, you've got a lot of guys that have confidence. But, I think the thing that hurts teams like Loyola or mid-major teams, to be specific, or just the view that we have in the media, and we can take one step further and go to another sport in football. You look what happened with UCF this year, and if that's not one of the greatest tweets I've ever seen this year, when UCF tweeted congratulations to UMBC, if that didn't send the message, I don't know what did.
I'll tell you something else that crossed my mind last weekend when you see Loyola Chicago advance to the Final Four. Wichita State used to dominate the Missouri Valley. If they never switched over to the American, we may not be talking about Loyola Chicago because they could have only maybe been one seed if Wichita State did find a way to win that conference if they were still in it this past year.
Zach, I think you make a great point. And the point that really needs to be, Zach, we've got to increase the size of this tournament. We do. No ifs, ands, or buts. There are really good teams. There were good teams that played last night for the NIT championship. there were good teams that played to start the NIT championship. Had they not been on the road and played on a neutral site, that they would have won games in the NCAA tournament as well. I saw Jeff Jones today from Old Dominion, and my gosh, what a year they had, and they don't even get a chance to play not only in the NCAA, but they don't get a chance to play in the NIT. So, I just think we have to increase the size. When we first started with 64, we had 200 some odd Division I basketball programs. We're up to over 350 Division I basketball programs now, and we have yet to increase the size of the tournament. And I promise you, it won't water it down, but I promise you this, it will help the excitement of the tournament, because we've sit here already for 6-7 minutes, and we haven't talked about the Blue Bloods. We haven't had one conversation about Villanova, Kansas, or Michigan, because you want to talk about the most exciting thing in this tournament is a mid-major in Loyola. This is what makes college basketball. And if you take Cinderella out of the ball, there will be no more party.
Yeah, but I guess I would follow up on that, because you have 68 teams right now. That's a lot of teams. How much is too much? Because I wouldn't be in favor of expanding it by too many teams. Maybe you want to throw an extra few teams in there, but if you start getting into 75, 80 teams, it's a lot of teams to watch, Coach.
Well, I could care less about a lot of teams to watch. I just want to make sure you have the very best tournament that you can have, and I think what you're dealing with right now. Now, you're talking to a coach, Zach, that has, every year when you're watching ESPN and they say the top 5 RPI teams never to play in the tournament, I coach 3 of those 5 teams. Now, and you've done your homework, but when you have a 21 RPI and you don't get in the NCAA tournament, you've got a problem as a head coach. I mean, the lowest seeded team RPI to never be in the tournament is 28. That's the closest to our team in 2006 when we were 21. And we also had an RPI of 34 and 36 before the tournament was as paired as what it is now. So I just think, I don't have the magic number. I just think it's an opportunity to make this tournament even better. And I think you've got an opportunity. You're playing games, if you want to call them that, or the first 4 in or whatever. If you want to enlarge that, there's an opportunity to do that. We'll just see what happens. But you know what's going to make the tournament grow? It's when the Power Fives start losing those games and they're not playing in the NCAA and they're playing the NIT. It's not going to be the loss of the mid-majors. It'll be the loss of the Power Fives not being able to get into it.
When you prepare for this team, as we're talking to Barry Hinson right now on CBS Sports Radio, and you've been in those rooms, you have to prepare for Loyola Chicago in those practices. What are the things that jump off the page right away and makes them such a difficult matchup coached by Porter Moser?
Well, I think the first thing you got to do is you got to pray to the good Lord that we've got to have some help for Sister Jean, because she's already sent out too many prayers. So we've got to have somebody to defend Sister Jean. I don't know if it's Father O'Brien or Pastor Shenanigan, but we got to have somebody to defend her. But,
I'll tell you though, a little bit too much with her press conference yesterday. She didn't need to have a press conference.
Oh, let me tell you about Sister Jean. My family suffered tragedy 4 years ago Christmas, and when we played Loyola, she was the first one to come and grab me when we arrived at Loyola, wrapped her arms around me and told her how she was praying for my family and I. And she is exactly what is good about this tournament, and she's an unbelievable ambassador, not for college basketball, but for Loyola University and just for human beings far and wide. But to answer your question, Zach, what Porter and his staff have done and what those young men have done, they play without egos. They play as much of unselfish basketball as I've ever seen. Everybody talks about how well they played offensively and how their spacing offensively is so good. But what these guys do is they play unbelievable spacing on defense. And if one guy breaks down, there's 2 or 3 guys there ready to pick up somebody's mistake. And it's just really fun. It's a great college basketball story, but it's a great story and life lessons that when you don't care who gets the credit, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And these young men have done that.
Get into the X's and O's, the toughest matchup, I think, for this Loyola Chicago team, and they're going to have to find an answer for it. I don't think you could stop him, but maybe there's a way to contain him. It's the big man for Michigan and Mo Wagner. How do they try to contain him coming up later tonight?
Well, they run up against that all year long. I like to flip the coin on you. They have to guard Loyola. So you've got a big man. When they go with Jackson and they sub Krutwig out of the ballgame and they go small, how are you going to guard those guys? Now, one thing that it'll be interesting to see tomorrow, Loyola has not seen a lot of zone. So it'll be interesting tomorrow if Michigan pops out the 1-3-1 zone, which Coach Beilein's known for, and it'll be interesting to see the adjustment that Loyola makes, because most of the time when you have a team that shoots so well from the perimeter, I mean, let's get one thing straight. Their worst three-point shooter, Zach, that plays valuable minutes is shooting 36% from the three. That's their worst three-point shooter. I mean, Dante Ingram is shooting right at 40%, and he's a young man that when he shoots it, you think it's going in every single time. But tomorrow will be interesting because the 1-3-1 will be able to spread out and possibly guard some of those guys on the perimeter. That'll be the strategic part of the game that I'm interested to see.
I also look at pressure. Some coaches, they'll dismiss the word pressure. But, you know, Loyola Chicago's playing with house money. Michigan, all the pressure, everyone's going to be rooting against them unless if you went to Michigan. Beilein also has some pressure on him as well. He's a tremendous coach, but he's still looking for that championship. How do you think pressure maybe plays an outcome in this game?
You know, Zach, I think the pressure is, you know, Coach Self said this week when interviewed. I think the pressure is to get to the Final Four. I think once you get there, I think the guys relax for the most part. I can't speak for other teams, but being at Kansas and being a part, you know, we got beat by Kentucky in the national championship at New Orleans my last year there. But once you get to the Final Four, it's really an environment. You know, I was able to be at Kansas practice today, the real practice, not the one for the fans, but and then I was able to watch film with those guys last night, and I could tell you that the environment was you know, very professional but very relaxed. And I think as a coach, you have to put your players in that position. And I think that's one of the most impressive things that Porter has done with his team is that, Zach, you can just see it. They're just having fun.
If you take a look at that game, since you're at the practice yesterday between, for Kansas, you take a look at this game coming up later today between Kansas and Villanova, and you just have a bevy of names in that backcourt: DiVincenzo, Brunson, Bridges, Newman, Graham. And the list goes on and on and on. This could be one fun matchup with the backcourts, Coach.
You know what, Zach? I think you got first of all, I think all the games are going to be wonderful, but I think the Villanova-KU game could be much like the KU-Duke game. I think it's got ESPN Classic, CBS Classic written all over it because I think it's got that type of game. I'm going to give you an interesting quote that I heard today. This was one of the Texas Tech coaches, and he said the best post player that they've played against all year long was Jalen Brunson.
Wow.
That's an interesting quote right there.
Very much so.
Interesting quote, and that's a very telling quote. So it'll be interesting tomorrow because one thing that Jay's done at Villanova is they play so unorthodox in so many ways. And it's not the first guy that gets beat. They're looking at second and third dribble penetration to where they make their plays. They make their plays off of guys getting beat the second or third time, and they're all skilled. They can all put it on the floor. You know, Golden State has had so much to do with the college basketball game in that everybody now
no
can pass,
question,
dribble, and shoot.
No question, you're exactly right. Because you look at Villanova this year. 20-something games this year with double-digit threes, and it's not just their guards hitting them. The kid Spellman was 4-7 a few games ago. You know, that's a difficult matchup when you have a big guy like that going 4-7 from behind the arc.
Zach, it's not every day that you have a big man that sets a middle ball screen at the top of the key, and as soon as he sets the ball screen, he runs to the corner, gets behind the three-point line. I mean, that's the most unorthodox thing. But you know what? It just gives a credit to Coach Wright and what his staff has done, because they're playing to the strengths of their team and the strengths of their individuals. And I think that's, I don't mind telling you, I think this is Coach Self's best coaching job. I've known him since 1982, and I'm telling you, I think it's his best job that he's ever done as a basketball coach, because you're talking about adapting a guy that's played a high-low system with two big men all his life, and then you go to a year this year where they play such a guard-oriented game and they shoot the threes as much as they do. I just, you know, as a friend and as someone that's really close, you know, you're biased, but I'm extremely proud of what he's done this year, and I'm excited to see that game tomorrow.
I have a feel you're rooting for Loyola Chicago and Kansas, but the question is who gets to the national championship game? Who are your two teams playing coming up on Monday night, Coach?
Well, I've always been a guy that spoke my mind, but you're right. I want Loyola and Kansas in the finals, but let's get one thing straight, my man. I'm a Jayhawk on the national final, so we hope that the Jayhawks walk out of here with a national championship.
Well, Coach, hey, we appreciate the time. Enjoy San Antonio. This is a whole lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Okay, Zach, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. You guys have a great week.